Well, now the cynics, the skeptics, the critics who hate President Trump and hate Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, they have come out in full force to say that Trump is way overstating what he's done and what his deal is gonna do, and so is Bibi, and they're all full of smoke, and they don't know what they're talking about, and then they got specific examples like, oh, suddenly Netanyahu was invited to go to Egypt to be part of the peace summit, but then he didn't go. And oh, the press reported that the Indonesian president was gonna go from Egypt over to Israel and have a huge dramatic meeting, and that was the beginning of a new era of peace in the Middle East, but oh, it actually didn't happen. And oh, Hamas had agreed to release not just the 20 living hostages, but 28 bodies of deceased Israelis who had been murdered by Hamas in Gaza in those terror dungeons. And they said they would release them all 28 on day one, and they didn't do it. They only released a few. So isn't that evidence that Trump and Bibi Netanyahu are taking a victory lap for nothing, or for practically for nothing, that they're completely overblowing what they've done and where we're going, and that we're not going to a new era of Middle East peace? Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg with a YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report, and I want to answer some of those questions, and I want to tell you right up front, militarily, this is a huge victory for the Israeli Defense Forces and for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You cannot take away the military victory. The pressure that Netanyahu and the IDF placed on Hamas literally and physically, militarily obliterated 23 of 25 Hamas divisions. That's incredible. And the other two divisions are in tatters, okay? Not completely defeated, but shattered, okay? And if Netanyahu had gone completely into Gaza City, as he vowed, that would be the end of Hamas. There would be barely a Hamas terrorist standing on his feet at the end of that, okay? That military pressure is why Hamas was like, we surrender, we surrender. I mean, they don't want to say that. They don't want to say we surrender because they're playing for time, but they knew they literally had days, maybe weeks, before they would be completely vanquished. So they took Trump's deal. So militarily, this is a huge victory for Israel. And anybody who says otherwise just doesn't know what they're talking about. Secondly, this is a huge, monumental Middle East diplomatic success. You can't, look, don't listen to the cynics, don't listen to the critics. They do not know what they're talking about. So what has just happened in the last few days is a huge military victory, because it took the military of Israel to crush so much of Hamas that they were ready to surrender. And it took then Trump leveraging the Israeli attacks and Netanyahu's fierce determination to finish off the job. Trump leveraged all that military into a diplomatic triumph, okay? But where are we going from here? Okay, the critics have, I mean, there are a few facts that are true. It's just the analysis of the critics is completely wrong. So yes, President Trump called Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi from the beast, from the American presidential limousine, as Trump and Bibi Netanyahu were driving from Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv up to Jerusalem, where Trump was going to give his big speech to the Knesset. So Trump decides to call the Egyptian president because Netanyahu and el-Sisi hadn't spoken during this entire war. I can't tell you exactly why, but I think the tensions were so high between the two of them, and they were friends before this. I know that because I've spoken to both of them about it, el-Sisi and Netanyahu. But I believe the tensions were so high between el-Sisi and Netanyahu because Israel believed, and because it had evidence, that somehow Egyptian border officials on the Egyptian-Gaza border either took bribes or turned a blind eye or something, allowing an enormous amount of weapons to flow into Gaza, that arming Hamas and preparing them for the October 7th war. I'm not saying that the Egyptian president had any complicity in October 7th or knew that's what was going to happen. I'm not even sure at this point whether el-Sisi knew that his border officials, his border guards on the Egyptian-Gaza border, I don't know that el-Sisi knew that they were allowing all these weapons in. It could have just been corruption on that border. But nevertheless, it was a huge reason why Egypt was, or why Gaza and Hamas had so many weapons, because they were flowing in underground through tunnels from the Sinai Peninsula, the Egyptian Sinai, into the Gaza Strip. And that was a huge problem and a huge source of tension between the two men. That may have been the reason. So yes, el-Sisi had not invited Netanyahu to go to the peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh on the Red Sea. Beautiful resort, by the way. You should go there sometime. And so Trump was like, I want you two to talk, and I want el-Sisi to formally invite Netanyahu. That was good for Trump. And so el-Sisi did, because el-Sisi wants a good, strong relationship with Donald Trump and the United States, even if el-Sisi's relationship with Netanyahu and Israel has been strained, which it has been. But Netanyahu is using his authority, using his leverage, using his position as the commander-in-chief of the United States, the world's only superpower, to say, look, I want this to happen, guys. El-Sisi, I want you to invite Bibi. And Bibi was grateful for that. But there were a few other complications. This was a very last-minute invitation, and it was complicated. Was Bibi going to have to shake hands with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas? Abbas isn't even going to be allowed in the Trump plan to be in, and the Palestinian Authority isn't going to be allowed to have a role in Gaza unless they reform. So why should Netanyahu shake hands with Abbas when there's really, Abbas has not been a positive influence? What about Turkish President Recep Erdogan? This is a guy who hosts Hamas leaders in Turkey. Right? This is a guy who's been cursing Netanyahu and cursing Israel and threatening military action, a Turkish military invasion of Israel to rescue the people of Gaza. So why should Netanyahu shake hands with Erdogan or even stand on the same stage with him? There's no groundwork there. What are those two going to talk about? Maybe at some point, there could be a better day. But nothing had been negotiated. So this was a very last-minute invitation. The good news is Trump was getting el-Sisi to say, look, you two need to start talking again. But I think actually Netanyahu was right to say, look, it's also the eve of a Jewish holiday, Simchat Torah, and these hostages have just come back, and I don't have an agenda or a plan for being at this summit. So, let me just say thank you for coming, President Trump, and say, let's do an Egyptian peace summit later. Trump was okay with that. I think Bibi did the right thing. So that's not an evidence that this thing is off track. Israel and Iran have stopped their missile war, but a spiritual battle is still taking place. Today, nearly 99% of Israelis don't yet know Jesus. Think about that. Nearly 99% of Israelis don't yet know Jesus, but a miracle is unfolding. One for Israel is a ministry that shares the gospel. And I can tell you, Jewish people are starting to accept Jesus in numbers not seen since the early church. Many Arabs are also finding faith and unity. One for Israel is an initiative of native-born Israelis sharing the gospel, discipling believers, and equipping spiritual leaders across Israel. As Romans 10:1 expresses, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. Your support helps bring the gospel back to Israel. I want you to do something right now. Pick up the phone and call 800-892-9065. That's 800-892-9065 to help share the gospel in Israel. Visit oneforisrael.org/partner or scan the QR code. Here's another one, though. This issue about the Hamas not giving all the 28 dead bodies back to Israel, that is a problem. But the day after Hamas didn't do it and only gave a few bodies back, what did President Trump do? He literally said in a statement, but verbally, if Hamas doesn't give these bodies back to Israel the way they promised to, we're going to force them to do it, maybe militarily. This is a test, okay? Hamas is testing if Trump is serious. He got what he wanted in terms of the live hostages, but maybe we can dribble out these Israeli bodies back to Israel and not really, and use them as leverage so that nobody does anything. And Trump's like, no, leverage? You got to be kidding me. We'll go to war to get those bodies back. That's what he's threatening Hamas. So let's watch and see how that plays out. This is a test, and I believe Hamas is going to lose that test. There's a few other things that happened, but every single one of these allegations against Trump and Bibi, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're overselling this thing. I don't agree with that. Now, time will tell, but I believe we are heading towards a game-changing era in the Middle East. Yes, I told you last week that was there a possibility this whole thing would blow up? Yes, but I was cautiously optimistic. I think I even used the word bullish, that the deal was going to happen and the live hostages would come out, and that's exactly what happened. And I told you that I believe we're heading towards a new Middle East. Yes, someday we're going to head into the war of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39, where Russia, Iran, Turkey, and other countries will come surround Israel and attack Israel. But we're not there yet. And yeah, someday there's going to be the Battle of Armageddon and the Antichrist, but that's a long way away, at least from where we are right now. So don't listen to the cynics. Don't listen to the critics. Yeah, the Indonesian president, there was some sort of leak that the Indonesian president was going to come to Israel on Tuesday and have some big meeting. But the more we're learning is that there was not a plan for that. There was a discussion sort of behind the scenes. Maybe that could happen. Is that the right time? And somebody leaked that. And of course, the Israeli press got all excited about that. But there wasn't a plan, and the Indonesian president didn't abandon a plan or break a plan. It wasn't a plan yet. It was a thought. Okay? I actually think that the Indonesian president is going to be he might actually be the first leader to join the Abraham Accords. Okay, so mark my words on that. I'm not saying I know that for sure. I've never met him, but based on remarks that the Indonesian president made at the UN just a few weeks ago, very warm towards Israel. The last point I just want to make is, look, there's always risk that Iran's going to come up with pull a card out of its sleeve and find some way to try to do more damage and create more fight. That's possible. I'm not saying it isn't possible. What I'm saying is that the trajectory we are on is very encouraging. And my cautious optimism is moving up towards optimism. I believe the Saudis want to make peace. I believe other countries, including Indonesia, want to make peace with Israel. And they're going to find their right moments. But there's a lot to have to happen in Trump's 20-point plan first. But we are moving dramatically. And the release of all 20 living hostages is not just a miracle, it is a huge answer to prayer. Don't miss that. Don't let the cynics steal the joy and the appreciation that you have between God, you and God, that God is answering our prayers as we've been praying for 2 years. There's been a lot of cynics who said, this will never happen, they'll never come out. Prayer is useless, God is nowhere to be seen. They're wrong. So let's take a deep breath. Let's keep praying that every step of the way this peace plan will be implemented, that Gaza will begin to be rebuilt, that God will supernaturally heal Israelis and Palestinians who have suffered terribly on both sides, and that we'll really see a moderate technocratic government start to be built and a security force that will completely disarm Hamas and demilitarize Gaza. I believe these things will happen. I believe they will take time. I believe it could be messy and complicated. Okay, welcome to the Middle East. But I'm an optimist, and I believe in the power of prayer. As my pastor who discipled me and Lynn in college, he was from India, and he used to say, Joel, Lynn, we serve a prayer, hearing and a prayer, answering God, a wonder-working God. And if you need English to English translation like we did and our friends did at the time, Joel, Lynn, we serve a prayer hearing and a prayer answering God, a wonder-working God. I believe it. Not just because my pastor said it, Dr. Koshi, because the Bible says it over and over and over again, because Jesus said it over and over and over again, and because I'm seeing prayers answered, miraculous prayers already, and I believe there's more ahead. This is Joel Rosenberg with a YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report.